Jose just joined, so we have him. Good evening, everyone. It's now 6 p.m. My name is Ben Brandon. I'm a development specialist with the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure. Welcome to tonight's webinar presentation for the Transbay Block 3 Community Meeting 3. We're going to wait just a few minutes to let other folks join before we get started with the program. Thank you very much. Kathleen and Lizzie, shall we?
Go ahead.
All righty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Benjamin Brandon. I'm a development specialist with the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure. I'd like to begin by welcoming you to the Transbay Block 3 Park Community Meeting 3 webinar presentation, and we're going to get going with our program. Lizzie, next slide, please. Okay, tonight we're going to go through a brief introduction by myself and Recreation and Parks Department. Then the bulk of the webinar is going to be a presentation by my colleague at San Francisco Public Works, Lizzie Hirsch. After Lizzie's presentation, we're going to move on to community feedback. There's going to be a public comment session with some Q&A on what we've presented. And finally, we'll wrap up with covering the next steps. Next slide, Lizzie. So the Block 3 Park project is a collaboration project between the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure, San Francisco Recreation and Parks Department, and San Francisco Public Works. OCII is the funder and sponsor of the project. Rec Park will be its final owner and operator. And then finally, San Francisco Public Works is the design lead and project management lead for the project. And for now, I'm going to turn things over quickly to Stacy Bradley with Recreation and Parks. Stacy.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Thanks, Ben, and good evening. We are really excited to be part of this process, especially in the beginning as the project, the park is designed. We're looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts on this concept design. We think it's very thoughtful, and I really just looking forward to moving forward with the design and being part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. So this is Lizzie Hirsch, part of the design team. And I just want to first go over how you can provide feedback. So that is key to us to give you an opportunity. And this is a webinar. So you'll see there's a Q&A box. At any point, you can actually ask us a question. But we will have a very specific question and answer session, at least a 30-minute session. And if for some reason we can't answer all those questions, we will be collating them and grouping them. We'll be sure to capture them later if for some reason we can't get them. So I just would ask everyone to, be open-minded, hear out everyone's ideas and questions, and communicate with respect. And just to let you know, at the end as well, there'll be a survey, and there is a lot of information in here. So and this process is different for all of us. So we will have an online survey. It will come up immediately after the meeting's ended, but you will have at least a 2-week window to be able to answer things. And you can have access to this presentation to actually take the survey. So the first thing we'd like to know from you is, did you attend the meeting too? Or do you work or live nearby? So those are the 2 questions we'd like you to answer.
And Lizzie, while we're waiting for folks to respond, I just wanted to mention to all of the attendees with this meeting that this meeting is a public meeting that's being recorded tonight. And we are required to inform you of that. So I just wanted all the folks to know. Thank you very much.
Oops, this went into mode. Sorry. Okay. So while you guys are taking the poll, we did want to go over sort of the process. So the process is, it's a 3-part process to develop this park. One is a comprehensive community outreach process. The design itself will be site-specific and place designed, as well as responsive to sustainability and environmental issues. So here we are at meeting 3. So we've had 2 other meetings. So the first meeting was an initial sort of feedback opportunity for the community. We shared 3 design options in the last meeting. And tonight we're going to go over a synthesized design option with the idea of getting more opportunities for refining the scheme. I'm sort of seeing that this might be cut off, so just want to make sure. And then much later on, we'll be having time to take all those, that feedback and then give you a kind of design update later on in the schematic phase, and also go over your feedback around the playground. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it back to Stacy, who will share with you the relationship that we have with her partners. So
great, thanks, Lizzie. Yeah, we Rec and Park as the owner of the park will manage the whole facility, the park, like we do with all of our parks, including the maintenance, the permitting, reservations. But of course, we're really lucky here to have the East Cut CBD as a really close partner. They are able to do park and restroom monitoring, security patrols in the evening, help with the movable furniture deployment, bringing it out and back in. And together we will be doing programming depending on what the park needs and how we want to activate it. the details of our relationship with the CBD is still ongoing, but we've had great experience so far with the East Cut CBD. I know they're just an excellent organization, so we're very excited to have them as a partner here. And this, this is just sort of the start of our relationship. And as we get farther along, as the park gets more developed, we'll have a clearer relationship with them. Thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. Thanks. So I am waiting to get the poll results. Aha. Okay. So let's see. Only 27% attended the last meeting on September 9th. Okay. Oh, and interestingly enough, that's all that we got. Okay, so given that many of you have not seen some of these slides, I will go over some of the context. So here we go. So here's our site boundaries here. It's within the East Cut neighborhood within the Transbay development. And we zoom in here. This is a future residential block. So block 4 is a residential unit proposed ongoing now. Block 2 is another residential block, and framed by these two is block 3, our park site, which is about an acre site. This is terminal, the temporary terminal, which basically a third of it will be the park itself. You can see it's a highly dense neighborhood. And in shaping what happens in Transbay is what it frames it on in terms of the other parks surrounding it. So we have the Rincon Park, which is a green grassy knoll park at the edge. You have the Salesforce Park that serves lots of different programs. And then we have the future Underramp Park that is going to be a highly programmed park that has lots of athletic opportunities, dog run, and I think food and beverage opportunities. So. And within this 10-minute walk radius, and here's our park again, key to this to know are the lots of childcare facilities. So we have 7 childcare facilities shown in this purple, with a future childcare facility actually on block 2. And then we only have 1 playground within this 10-minute walk radius. Additionally, we do have 2 dog facilities, and then we have a future dog facility at the Underramp Park. And we do have a few bathroom facilities. So these things do inform what is going to actually happen on the park itself. There was clearly a need for a playground. So that's one of the key elements for you to be aware. So, again, in our earlier iterations and meetings with the community, there was a desire for different kinds of spaces. And we're sharing this with this idea of really, this helps define the scale of the different spaces. So there was an interest in having a flexible space that would allow neighborhood events to occur, exercise events, then a smaller scale space that is like 500 to 2,000 square feet for community gatherings, picnicking, tables and chairs, things like that. And then lots of seating. Everyone wanted lots of seating, some that would encourage community seating, and then some more on its own. And then as far as the playground, we carved out about 38 square feet for the site. And we're showing you 2 that are similar in that scale. And moving to the site itself, again, this is our acre park framed by the 2 residential units. What you can see is very unique is this mid-block connection that actually accesses other open space. So we want to honor this link. Also, it's will be well served by future bike lanes here, 2 bike lanes, and obviously lots of pedestrian paths with 2 new small alleys that are framing the site itself. To note, we're indicating this is the year-round sunspot at all times of year. There's always sun in this spot. Obviously, with the seasons, we do get sun later, determined on the time of year and the time of day. So, as many of you had not attended the last meeting, I'll go over a little bit more detail. We actually shared 3 design options. And really with this idea of really creating 3 very different options to create a kind of dialogue. So one is called the clearing, the commons, and the ripple. And basically one is this notion of a larger open space at the middle. The other is around a sort of flexible plaza space with the playground framing it, and then mixed sort of spaces of landscaped islands of sorts with a grove at the west edge with the play at this end. So these are our results from the community. So we got about 112 respondents. Of community 2, only 22% had attended community meeting 1. But many did live in the neighborhood, 86%, 66 work in the neighborhood. And then we have about a quarter of the people that have children and a quarter of people that have dogs. Now, as far as we asked in the survey, what was your preference? And also gave people the option to provide, they could also choose all of them. They'd be satisfied with any of them. And as you can see from this pie chart, it was very equally, there was a lot of, there's no clear winner, let's put it that way. And there's a dead heat between the clearing and the commons, which are frankly the 2 most different from each other. So the clearing being more natural and the commons, having more hardscape, flexible hardscape, and the ripple somewhere in between. So just to highlight the sort of main highlights of why people chose these, this is sort of a summary of what people said about the various schemes. The clearing gave a sense of simple openness framed by planting and natural materials and less paving. In the commons, it was a more coherent urban square that provides landscape zones that respond to the environment. And finally, the ripple was liked because of its focus on nature, that have provided different scale gathering spaces, and particularly like the western edge with the tree grove. So we were confronted with how to approach this now. And when we looked deeper into the survey and with more comments, often when people said they liked the ripple, they would refer to the clearing. And often when in the clearing, they said, they also like the ripple. So we felt there was more of a synergy between those 2, and therefore more interest in sort of the more natural approach. So we opted to go more with the clearing, but with consideration of, what potentially could we borrow from the other 2 schemes. So in essence, and I'm just going to take a few highlights, why was the clearing chosen when the person chose the clearing? And I like this particular quote, so I'll share it. The naturalistic approach is super desirable, a needed touch of nature among all the glass steel buildings. But then what was missing from the clearing? And so they did like the flexible chairs and tables from the commons. They also did like the idea of keeping the existing palms, but understood that, maybe they didn't fit in. But there was some interest in keeping the palms. Interestingly enough, so we also gave a category about what other elements should we consider. So we got a lot of comments about dogs, probably a good 15 or so comments, and they were very mixed and contradictory to each other at times. So just want to share that because it does factor into our approach. So, you know, in some cases, people say they don't want to allow dogs in the park, and others say space for all residents, including dogs, kids, and singles. So we saw this kind of sort of mid-zone comment. I agree that deterring dog owners from destroying plants and grassy areas is key. A designated relief area, please. So we picked up on that. So you'll see soon. So in the clearing here to the left, you know, from the comments, we also looked for what people really were drawn to, you know, in the survey. And consistently people spoke about really desiring a little more buffered edge than the clearing had. So that was probably the most consistent comment. Then as well, there was an interest in some shade, more shade in general, possibly a pergola. And then there were less, you know, various other comments like the flexible chairs and seatings from the commons, possibly retaining the palms. They liked the location of the bathroom on the main street, and some interest in the lawn. So those were the main takeaways. So with that in mind, with all those comments, we did draw upon that. But to step back for a second, you know, this slide is really, this is showing Washington Square Park, and on it is the size of the B3 park. So you can see it's an acre versus about a 2-acre park. But in this slide, you see that, you know, in every era, park design changes. And so we feel now today, you know, what should we be doing now? We wouldn't be designing another Washington Square Park, but it should, one, you know, take into consideration of the community, but also, as we know, we need to really respond to our new climatic condition that we're in today. So these are the key, this is the key framework in which we worked and considered when we actually finalized our synthesized design. One, that it serves the community, it's multi-generational and inclusive and provides a lot of different opportunities and flexible programming. It should also serve the environment, so it reduces water uses, provides habitat, and we also use sustainable materials in the site design. And then finally, the history of the site is very rich, has had a lot of shifts and changes. So we felt also the materials themselves should be reflective of the site's history. So we'll get into more detail later. So I start with this page. This is truly the inspiration of the clearing, which is this notion of a framed open space to kind of block out the intensity of the urban world and bring some nature into the city. So on this page, you see a plan at the center, an elevation, and then what we call a program diagram. So I'll go over the plan a little bit. We very much retained the essence of the clearing, sort of this boomerang shape or oyster shape, we're not sure what to call it. That is this very open space that is then framed by, you know, a lot of trees and features. So at the top is the upper deck, which is the special sunny zone with seating framing it and providing more frame. The meadow at the heart of the clearing. And then we did introduce a new sort of mid zone for another seating opportunity, and then another framed seating at the bottom of the meadow. And this is slightly elevated, so it's like almost like a informal amphitheater space. And then, we have this loop that can be kind of a walk loop and, entered and exited in various ways through stairs and ramps. And along the way are lots of seating opportunities on the loop here and here, up on the deck, more seats. And the playground still remains on the northwest edge. Where we changed some things is at the corners here. You'll see a grove here and a grove here, which is what we borrowed from the Ripple, with the ability to add sort of flexible seating all throughout the park where needed and based on the orientation. The new things, we added what we're calling a stewardship building, which functionally supports the gardening staff as well as the CBD, who can manage the programming of the chairs and tables. As well as we added the deco, a bathroom opportunity right on the right of way, as well as you'll see a little dog relief zone right on Main Street to help sort of mitigate the needs of dog owners and make it more welcoming to them. So just in terms of the program, just the key things to understand is this is the big sort of flexible space that acts as the sort of intersection between the two buildings. The mid-size gathering spaces, and the blue indicates all the different seating opportunities. So we have seat walls, actual benches, flexible table and seating under the grove, which could be used throughout the park. So now we're going to dive into what this feels like, this park. So this view is from the Beale Tehama corner. This is one of the seat walls that frames one of the entrances, and to the right are part of the grove and the flexible seating with a storage or a stewardship building here outlined, as well as in the distance, the meadow and the beginning of the loop. You can see the loop. And so the meadow is, filled with seasonal grasses and wildflowers. And also it's the opportunity to bring sort of a different scale tree into the park, because the outer trees are kind of more significant height to help sort of frame and mitigate the larger scale buildings. To the right is the future playground. This hasn't been articulated yet, and you'll actually get an opportunity to weigh in on that. So we're calling this the deck view. This is the upper deck. So you're slightly elevated above, looking through over to through the meadow, through this mid-deck zone, this informal mid-deck zone. So we imagine it filled with some boulders, again, the meadow feeling, lots of seating on the upper deck, some more informal paths to walk through the meadow, but hang out in the meadow as well. We're actually creating a little zone that we're calling either the teen hangout, that could potentially be a few, chin-up bars, hangout spot for teens. And over here is the beginning of the grove. But you can feel the sense of being framed by significant amount of trees. And then again, along the loop is, lots of seating opportunities along the way. So stepping back as a sort of bird's eye view from the south, again, here you can see the entrance to Block 4, and this is sort of the path between the two. The flexible zone here, the different events, bigger events could happen. What we're calling a sort of seating bench to frame the meadow and protect it, actually. These informal paths that carry you up through the meadow, an opportunity to hang out here, walk through to the upper deck, the upper sunny deck. And then, of course, you have the whole loop around with opportunities to, move back to the, alleyways, couple opportunities, trying to create it actually quite clear, not too forested edge, so you have a sense of borrowed view as you kind of walk along the alleyways into this meadow zone. And you can see peeked over here is the dog relief, the deco over here, lots of sort of informal seat walls to hang out. And you can see, yeah, more opportunities for seeing along the alleyways. On both sides, we'll have these sort of informal seating zones. Now we'll dive into some pictures that kind of, share with what we intended and the ideas behind it. So number C, this is C, is the upper deck zone, sort of big deck planks to reflect the, the maritime period, and with the opportunities of something like yoga to happen. The middle deck here, the sense of feeling immersed in the meadow itself, with potential like sort of teen zone, exercise zone right nearby. And here, A is this area here, the flexible zone under the grove, with potentially using, the flexible tables and seating, putting it wherever you want, or Tai Chi. And then, different kinds of seating opportunities. And here you see something right in your backyard that this is the guy placed dog relief, inspired our little dog relief idea. And as far as the environment, we're trying to create this sort of rich habitat, things that are going to draw wildlife in, butterflies and birds, provide some seasonality and sense of change, as well as using materials that are going to be sustainable and local. And then again, this opportunity to engage with the community itself, getting them involved in the wildlife and creating opportunities for less sort of more free-form play as well. And finally, the how the site is reflected is really in the materials that we use. So, this was the original intertidal zone where it was, mostly wetlands. So reflecting, the idea of the nature that was once there, the maritime period, the beginnings of the whole coast, the whole industry of the maritime. So using decks, some suggestion of the water line, and then the East Cut, which is a big shift in terms of the beginning of the big urbanization of this particular site and area. So taking cues and, the walls themselves looking like as if they've been, from the earth and stone. This is potentially one of the images for the stewardship building that could actually take on the layers, which suggest the layers of the cut. So this is where the stewardship, by the way, building is. And this is the meadow, area A, and B is the deck. So, and moving on to the stewardship building, which is located here. The idea is that it, is a lasting structure. It will potentially draw people to the park, potentially illuminate from within and create kind of this light box. And its function is to store both the furniture as well as, all the gardening materials. And it would be shared between the CBD and Recreation and Parks. And here we've shown, you can see quite different kinds of materials. The deco, just for reference, this is the updated deco option, which would be here. So, we're using these images as a way for you to actually provide feedback. We have very specific questions in the survey about this page. So, looking to see what you are drawn to, or whether, any of these would work in your mind. So, a perforated metal option, this idea of showcasing the layers of earth, a wooden option, a perforated brick building, a building that possibly reflects a little bit of the early buildings that were once there on site. So again, this is something for you to study and consider, with time. So just in the last meeting, we had shared that, we were looking to get the bones of the park, the framework of the park sorted first before going into any details of the children's play, because the children's play would really reflect the final theme. So this is the first time we're really looking more deeply into this. And one of the first decisions that is important to make is deciding who are we designing for. And so just to give you guys first an understanding of the scale. So it's a 3,800 square foot space we have. And so, for example, Salesforce, which is really for school age kids, is about 2,600 square feet. And then there's another example of Moscone East Playground that is almost identical in the toddler size of a 3,600 square foot. That you can see it has some picnic tables and other kinds of features throughout. But additionally, there's a 5 to 12. And then this is a kind of an all-age structure at South Park. So that's a 3,100 square foot. So this is really just to give you a sense of the scale, but a beginning of this discussion about which age group should we focus on. So you'll see in the survey, we're going to give you these options. So what we're trying to, get a sense is, here is a toddler scale type of playground, probably is around 3,800 square feet. You can see the structures are smaller. The scale of the kids are smaller. And yeah, so we're gonna, we'd like to hear from you, one, is this the age group that you wanna focus on, or, and also which type of feel of the playground. This is kind of like, what do you feel like seeing out there? And then this is more of a, slightly more challenging structures that, are good. Most playgrounds are good to maybe 10 years old, maybe 8. It really depends on your kid. But really this notion of having a mix or more challenging structures within the site. So here are some examples that you'll get to choose from. And then also on the survey, we also ask you, we give a little more, this is a way of narrowing down the kinds of things you're drawn to. Often playgrounds are made of, these structural base plays. So it could be these big, tree trunk types, climbers, wooden base structure, a climbing structure, or a more common sort of slide and structure. And then we have this group called imaginative play, which is to be more suggestive and referential of possibly this is part of the waterscape. So many of these things refer to the water. Again, lots of ways of interpreting that. And another element are the interactive elements. So things like, springing, movement-based play, sand, whether sand is something you would really like to see, swings, music, lots of options again. And all of this you will get to weigh in and vote on in the actual survey. And then we'll have other categories about what's really most important to you. So you'll see that again on the survey. So that actually concludes the overall presentation. That's a lot of information, but I'm going to hand it over to Kathleen and leave you with this, just to start thinking about the kinds of questions you have. And I'll introduce you, Kathleen, who is the project manager of the team, will actually be taking your questions and we'll be responding to those. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lizzie. That was a beautiful presentation. Hello, everybody. As Lizzie mentioned, I'm the project manager from Public Works. We have a few questions, but I see that there's not that many questions. So I just want to make sure that everybody realizes at the bottom of their screen, if they kind of wave their mouse, they'll see a Q&A. And you could type in your questions and we will answer the questions now, and we will, type in a response. We will also be posting all of the questions and answers on our website along with the presentation. The presentation is recorded as well as the physical copy of the presentation. So we have about 60 people in the community attending right now. And I see that one person is very familiar with the Q&A, but I don't see any other questions. So I'm hoping that other people are able to find it. Okay, great. So with that, I'll pass the first question on to my colleague, Ben. There's a question about how many stories are the 2 residential sites, and is low income housing included?
Sure. So let me start off by answering actually the second question, which is that both blocks 2 and block 4 do incorporate affordable housing. Block 2 is a 100% affordable housing site. That site will be split between a senior complex as well as a affordable family complex. Block 4 is a mixed use site, and OCI is in discussions and with a development partner for on that block. It is both market rate and affordable. And now let me get to how many stories they each are. So for block 2, we don't have a design for that project yet. The current zoning for that project shows a mid-rise building on the eastern side of the block with a maximum height of 165 feet, or about 16 stories. The western side of that block is zoned for a mid-rise or podium building that caps out at about 85 feet, not about, at 85 feet. So 8 stories there. And then it has townhomes fronting the park with a maximum height of 50 feet. Regarding block 4 on the eastern side of that site, there is a proposed 500-foot tower totaling 47 stories. The western side of that block is a mid-rise building in an L shape with a maximum height of 165 feet, so about 16 stories there. And then fronting the park at block 4, there is a townhome component, 6 stories as proposed, and that maxes out at 70 feet. So that's that, Kathleen.
Excellent, thank you. And so Ben, I'm going to direct another question towards you. What will happen to the existing structures in the temporary Transbay terminal?
I think at present, right, like there are structures that span the entire temp terminal site. The most predominant structures that people probably are familiar with are the Greyhound building, which are at the current location of block 2. We believe that those buildings will be demolished when it is time to develop all 3 development blocks. There are also some buildings in between block 3 or the future block 3 park and future block 4 development that also were, facilitation buildings for the former terminal, and those would be demolished as well.
And I'm going to direct some questions to Rec Park, Stacy, and to Andrew from the CBD. A question has come up about who is maintaining the park, and whether we have funding to maintain. The city has funding to maintain the park, and also what mitigation issues what mitigation measures do we have to keep the park from having a lot of encampments? So I will direct those to Stacy and Andrew.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. I'll start with that. And we'll need to work with the Board of Supervisors on making sure that we're fully funded for the additional maintenance here. And the East Cut CBD does have some funding that's going to go towards the maintenance effort. And I'm gonna actually pass it over to Steve Sosmowski, who is our Park Service Manager, who will manage the maintenance at this site.
Thank you, Stacy. Again, my name's Steve Sosmowski, and I'm a Park Services Manager with Recreation and Park. This park will be managed by Recreation and Park, and will become part of the portfolio of parks serving the whole city. And as far as the maintenance, the primary maintenance functionality will be Rec and Park's responsibility. There will be some supplemental opportunities for the CBD to help partner with us in helping to provide oversight and kind of some programmatic support as well, which will help dissuade negative use of the property. Additionally, the park will be under jurisdiction by our park code. So any park code violations can be directed to our park ranger unit for enforcement. And they are a citywide enforcement arm of our department. And I think that answers the question. So
And,
the only thing that I would add, if I may, is that the East Cut CBD provides services in the neighborhood 24 hours a day. And so particularly in the overnight hours, we see our security detail making regular rounds of the park, sort of outside of when the park is operating open hours, if you will. And we, as was mentioned by Steve and Stacey, we have funds that are actually through our voter approved management plan to assist in providing appropriate stewardship to the park. And I mean, Lizzie, this was a great presentation. I couldn't be more excited to see this happen for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
you all. So Steve, another question for you is, will there be hours of operations for the playground area?
So typically subsets of parks don't have more restrictive or less restrictive hours. By default, all parks in San Francisco default to a 5 a.m. to midnight park hours per legislation that's on the books. Through community advocacy and through the design process, the community can help inform the department about if they would like to have more restrictive hours than the default 5 a.m. to midnight. And and any restrictive hours would be commission approved and then again enforced by park rangers.
Thank you. And there's a question about the playground. Lizzie, I think there's just a miscommunication. There's a question that says, why have you chosen to focus on toddlers for the playground?
Yeah, actually, we're asking the community, we're actually sharing that there are a couple ways of programming that playground. Maybe I'll go back to the slide just so that, in fact, we haven't decided. So we're sharing with two ways of going, which is sort of smaller scale play versus what we call this combined play that is a little more challenging. So we're actually asking the community to weigh in. So we haven't actually made a decision and want to get everyone's feedback on that.
Thank you, Lizzie. And then there's some other questions about activities in the park. Like, do you think that there could be elements such as chessboards and checker patterns? And then there's another question about whether there are opportunities like specifically for skateboarders here or at another park nearby.
we currently don't have any fixed tables, but I certainly think there are surfaces that people could bring, you know, temporary, you know, checkers or chessboards could actually happen like in this sort of deck zone, or we will have the flexible tables and chairs. I mean, something we can consider, you know, if we want to put some more permanent seating, but currently it does not have that. But it doesn't preclude people bringing it to the site itself. And then the other question was skateboard. Wouldn't be encouraged to do it here. I do believe Soma itself has a fairly significant skate park not too far away. So hope that answers that.
Yes, and they were also asking, sorry, there was a second part to that question, whether the under ramp park would be able to house or have a skateboarding option or skateboard rink in it. And Ben, I'll pass that question over to you.
Just to help Ben, in our appendix, we did put under ramp park in here. Just, we figured this would be a question.
Yeah,
So
thank you for bringing that up, Lizzie. And yes, I can address that. So as you can see by the graphic that Lizzie has brought up on the screen, under ramp park's design has been heavily vetted thus far. We have a draft schematic design that's basically ready to go towards entitlement. What this graphic here is showing is the programming of that park. And as was referenced in this presentation, there's a huge dog area, and there's not specifically an area that we have carved out, you might say, to facilitate a skate park. I should also add that much of the programming of this space, as you see it here, is dependent on approvals by both the TJPA, which is the landowner of the future under ramp park, as well as Caltrans, which also owns another subset of the parcels that will make up the park. And so the programming that you see is indicative of what both of those entities have accepted and signed off on.
Thank you, Ben. So also another question that came up was the time frame for the neighboring developments, Block 2 and Block 4.
Sure, I can speak to that one. I mean, our tentative, we finally just selected a development team for Block 2. Right now, we're expecting that we're going to move through pre-development, and it would start construction hopefully in early 2023, and then be completed by spring of 25. With respect to Block 4, the actual definitive timeline for start of construction is still open, but right now we're targeting somewhere in 2022, and we expect a 3 to 3.5 year build for that project at a minimum. So in that sense, it could be 2025 to 2026 for those completions.
Thank you, Ben. And then also another question came up about our schedule for this park and when we will be constructing this park.
And you're, I know, about to pull that up, but we are hoping to begin construction on this park in early 23 and complete its construction by early 2025.
Thank you. Let's see. So there's a question for Andrew. Does the city or East Cut, does the city or East Cut CBD have demographic data on families in the vicinity and the age of children who live nearby? Shouldn't age of most children, which I'm guessing is mostly between 0 and 5, drive the play area offerings?
I'll do my best to answer it. It's, I mean, the neighborhood is so rapidly evolving, and even the future developments and what housing sort of household numbers look like is a little bit of a guess, but we have some ideas about it. Certainly the CBD actually does try to track regularly sort of the number of units, who we think and what sort of population is in those units. honestly, the next census will be the best and most accurate. I mean, the change from the last one in 2010 to here in 2020 is tremendous in this neighborhood. But yes, we do see the majority of kids being in the sort of the younger age right now. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. And then there's a question, Lizzie, about the walking loop. If I guess she's wondering if the person's wondering like how long that loop is, if it would, be a loop that people could use towards, getting their steps in. Their 2,000 steps, I guess.
Yeah. So this is, I think this entire loop is about 500 feet. So, I mean, we are, it's an acre site, it's not a very big site, but we did actually consider this. We actually created some steps in here to make variation from a ramp to step to create options for people. So we did actually take that into consideration. What we were trying to encourage was this notion that you could take all kinds of loops and varied loops as much as we could. So I hope that answers that question.
I think, yes. And Lizzie, there is a question also about grade changes from one side of the park to the other. If you could kind of just review that, that would be great.
Yeah, this is a very gentle slope going down this way, but we were going to elevate this slightly. It needs to be studied more deeply, but slightly elevated, like by 30 inches or so above this. So this would be slightly elevated. Again, these are details that we need to figure out and do sections, but that's our idea, that it's slightly elevated so it doesn't feel like a wall, but it feels a little bit separate. And this notion that it actually slopes down a bit with this idea of a sort of organic amphitheater space.
And Lizzie, I'm going to direct another question to you about lighting. If you could kind of review park lighting.
Yeah, we actually have not indicated lighting in this, but obviously lighting would be very much part of this. We typically use pole lighting because it's most durable. So we will very much include lighting in all of this. It will be surrounding the loop. There will be lighting on Tahama and Clementina. That's kind of the next layer of design. We did feel the stewardship building itself could be like a light box of sorts, to make it glow and feel even more inviting at night.
Let's see, I'm going to shoot a few more questions your way.
Sure.
Are there any, a question is, will there be any water features in the park?
We could probably consider a water fountain, which we actually have not located yet on here, but we often do that. Could be associated with the playground or, right here. Yeah, we can definitely do that, but no specific water features. Historically, I've been designing projects for the last 18 years in the city, and the few times early on in my career, I did often put water features in, and after a while, they would stop working and stop being maintained. So there isn't a good track record on that, as well as this climate is not particularly conducive to water, actually, even though we love them for the few days. So, and also just from a sustainability, it's not really encouraged to use water resources. So that's a mixed bag of responses, but we definitely could put a water drinking fountain, I should say. So.
Okay, and thank you, Lizzie. Just on the lighting, there's a concern from one of the community members about glare, nighttime glare. If you could speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, whenever we design anything now based on Title 24, I mean, there's very specific things about nighttime light to preserve the darkness. So we would make sure that all the lamps are cast down So not to create light glare and light pollution in the atmosphere. So yes, that's something that we consider as we select our lighting element.
Thank you. And so this is a question, Ben, for you and possibly Andrew. Question has come up. Can the temporary terminal space be used for kids' recreational purposes while we wait construction to kick off in 2022, 2023?
Yeah, I can take the initial response, which is that, OCI is in the process right now of getting ready to release pretty soon an interim activation request for proposals. Once that is, that goes out, we will see what comes back in terms of proposals on how to activate the temp terminal site in the interim before construction starts on the 3 development blocks and including the park. So really, we just kind of have to wait and see what we get in terms of those responses.
Thank you. And then Lizzie, I think this is the last question. There was a question about whether there can be basketball hoops at this park.
We have not programmed for basketball hoops, in part because the under ramp park is very much focused on that kind of sports.
And there
Which
is a
is-
basketball court.
Yeah. Lizzie, can you bring back up the
Sure.
the program for Under Ramp Park, and we can point it out to
Yeah.
the public? And while you're getting there, I can explain that yes, Under Ramp Park does have a specific zone programmed for sport courts. That zone is along Essex Street, south of Folsom, actually underneath one of the existing Caltrans ramps. So on this page, Lizzie, it's going to be the very bottom where you see sports in orange.
Yeah.
That block right there is sports courts that include the full court basketball court. So we're not programming those types of uses at the Block 3 park because we have them just a mere couple blocks away in the future development of this park.
Thank you, Ben. And then there was a question, and perhaps Andrew and Stacy could answer this. There was a question about what authority do park rangers have, especially with any sort of overnight campments. Do they have police powers, or how does law enforcement get involved?
So I think-
Definitely a question for Stacy and
Yeah,
Steve.
I think this is a good one for Steve. And see if you want me to take it.
Yeah, I'm here. So yes, park rangers do have citation authority. They do have enforcement authority, and they frequently call on SFPD for backup when things escalate or when they're needed. The primary response, though, would be to the park rangers to respond. Park hours are enforced, and if anyone is in the park after the park is closed for the public access, they are subject to citation.
Okay, and Steve, so that was another question that someone had, was will the park be open 24/7?
So just to reiterate, all of the parks under Rec and Parks jurisdiction have a default maximum park hours of 5 a.m. to midnight. So if the community would like those hours to be less than that, then we will engage in a process to determine what the appropriate park hours for this site will be as part of the design process, and present that to the commission as part of the park development plan. If people are comfortable with the 5 a.m. to midnight, then there's no need to engage in that process.
Thank you, Steve. And so Lizzie, a few design questions. There was some questions about the opportunities for projecting movies on the storage building, and questions about whether there'll be opportunities perhaps to include USB charging units and the seating. and a quirk, you know, whether you have opportunities to put in swings for adults in some manner. So if you, all those questions, Lizzie. So drive-in, movie
Okay.
theater.
So the stewardship building, one of the things we will likely have, you know, some kind of conduit or electrical to allow for some small screening. My understanding from Rec and Park, due to that it's a residential neighborhood, it would be small scale. I mean, Salesforce is right nearby, and sort of larger, bigger events would happen there, but there is an opportunity to do smallish scale, and we would set up that building to allow for outlets and things like that. I don't know, USB, I would actually have to ask Steve, Rec Park's policy on that. I'm not aware of having provided that in other parks that I've designed. I don't know if Steve has any comments about that.
Yeah, and definitely based off of our experience with illegal tampering with electrical infrastructure within our parks, we highly recommend not including that type of an amenity without extensive research in how to sustain it, let alone manage it. You know, I think enough people have weighed in this community with concerns about inappropriate use or after hours use, that having that type of an amenity available, which is very difficult, if not impossible to secure, is really opening the site up for misuse.
Thank you, Lizzie and Steve. There's a few questions about dogs. Will you have, like, you know, dog bag dispensers, and how will we keep dogs out of the meadow areas or planting areas?
Good questions. I did realize we didn't respond to the question about adult swings, just to let you know. You know, swings take a huge amount of space, but something that we considered in, you know, the other schemes that we did show potentially some small sort of bench swing type of things. We could, you know, later on as we design, maybe in this area potentially, we'll study, you know, how viable and whether that's a good idea. I mean, you know, so we are taking that into consideration, and we do have this kind of notion of a little bit of an informal kind of it's not exactly a swing, but, you know, potentially a little bit of something interesting here that would allow some movement. But big old swings, not possible, because they probably would take this much space to put in a swing. So dogs, yeah, and fencing. So normally these days, whenever we plant anything, we certainly do protective planting fence for establishment. So we would certainly do that for this project. We will work with Rec and Park, whether they would want it to be a more permanent type of fencing or more temporary. And those will come with time, you know, as we develop deeper what we think is really viable. But I have actually personally done some children's playgrounds with grasses, and, you know, children are pretty tough. And once the plants got established, it has worked. So again, this is something we will work with Rec and Park specifically as we develop the design, but we will for sure have some temporary fencing, you know, that you won't really necessarily see, but we'll protect the plants initially for establishment. And then we definitely, I think we often have amenities for dogs, like, yeah, we'll have those. I mean, we certainly will have it in this dog relief area. So trash cans and.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, everybody. So I think that concludes our question and answer. And Lizzie, if you could just pull up the slide, just to recap that
this one or this one?
Thank you. The schedule slide. So just to recap, we're just completing our final concept phase. We still have a long design process. So we have the next phase is what we call schematic design phase, which is over an 8-month process. And at that time, when we're just about done with that phase, we'll have a community meeting number 4 to get your input again. Before we launch into design development, which is a much more detailed design, before we then launch into what we call construction documents, which we use to put the project out to bid for construction. And so we anticipate that we'll be going out for bid in September 2022, and that we'll start construction in February 2023. So we look forward to seeing you all again for our next community meeting, which we anticipate will be in the summer of 2021. And just so you know, once we reach 100% schematic design, we'll be going before both the Rec Park Commission as well as the OCII Commission. So I also want to let you know that, again, we will be posting updates on our Public Works website. This recording of this presentation will be posted on the website, the physical presentation itself, and the survey results. You can also find the Survey Monkey for this community meeting on that website. But also, if you just hold on after we shut down this Zoom meeting, it should pop up on your screen. And if it doesn't, then you can always go to our Public Works website and answer it. And we'd like to get your guys' answers in before the end of the month, if possible, just because we want, hopefully it's fresh in your minds after this presentation. And so with that, that concludes our presentation. And I want to say thank you to all our partners, Rec Park, CBD, OCII, and the design team that have worked really hard on the presentation in this entire conceptual phase. So thank you, everybody, and good night. Have a good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Good night.
Night.